This is Dr. Warren Vander Hill interviewing Dr. Nancy Behforouz, Emeritus Professor of Biology for the Ball State History Project. The date is January 25th, we think, 2005. Nancy, I want to begin by thanking you very much for helping me with my research project. I'd like to begin with a kind of standard question I've asked all the participants in the project, and that is if you would tell me some about where you're from, your educational background. Basically, in this question, I'd like to get you from beginnings, if you will, especially from an educational standpoint, to the decision to come to Muncie, Indiana, and to join the Ball State faculty. Now, admittedly, I know a little bit more about this than I would have a couple weeks ago because I've interviewed your husband. So at some point, if you're going to use names of places in Iran, I'll probably stop and ask you to spell them because they have all kinds of problems with Mohammed with spelling things.
Oh.
But be that as it may, tell me a little bit about Nancy Behforouz's life.
Well, thank you, and I'm very glad to be here to participate in this project. I was born in Bellefonte, Pennsylvania. My parents were living there. My father was a professor at Penn State University, chemistry. And when I was about 4 and a half, they decided to move to Schenectady, New York, where he joined the General Electric Research Laboratory as a research chemist. He had his PhD in organic chemistry, having studied under Dr. Whitmore, who was a very famous older organic chemistry of years gone by. We moved to Schenectady in about 1950, and I grew up in Schenectady in a suburb called Niskayuna, New York. And actually, several people at the university I know of were also in New York at that time.
Joe Trimmer.
Joe Trimmer actually was our paper boy.
Oh, jeez, didn't tell me that. That's great.
But in any case, I grew up there, and when it got time to go to college, I looked at a lot of New England schools. I had a scholarship at Cornell, but I really wanted to possibly pursue music and possibly science. I was fascinated by microbiology. I had read The Microbe Hunters by de Kruif, and when I was
Paul de Kruif.
Yeah,
famous Dutch American.
Yeah, when I was in junior high, I think, and I just always fascinated by microbiology, and I liked biology, etc. So Indiana University at that time had quite a reputation. Watson had come out of IU, and I could major in bacteriology, which was kind of unusual. And I don't know whether there are any majors left in simply bacteriology anywhere in the United States right now, but even at IU there is no major in bacteriology. So I went there tucked with under my arm a French horn, which I was also considering majoring in, and my love for microbiology. And I did take lessons in French horn, and I did they kind of wanted me at the music school to pursue that, but I just wasn't a performer, at least not at that age. Now I think I could do it, but then I couldn't. And I really, really enjoyed the bacteriology. And when I got there, I was rather advanced in my biology understanding, so I was able to sort of exempt out of the first year of biology and get into some honors courses. And I even had a course with all the top people in that biology department my freshman year, which was a real inspiration. And they did 2 or 3 week stints with us in the laboratories, even having a small stint with Mullen, who was Muller, I think his name, a Nobel Prize winner who discovered the I don't know, in the teens and 20s of the 1900s, the detrimental effect of X-rays.
Oh, okay.
Herbert Muller, I think his name is.
Yeah.
But anyway, so it was a very, very good experience at IU. And I went on to graduate after actually 3 years at IU, partly because I was sort of advanced going into IU, partly because I had met Mohammed, my husband, at that point, and he was farther along. He was in his PhD program, and I really kind of wanted to get on with it and get finished and all that sort of thing. So I went to summer schools and whatever. So I finished, I went there in 1963, and I graduated in 1966. Then I went to a master's program in the University of Virginia in Charlottesville for a master's degree in science in microbiology. And in the middle of that, Mohammed and I got married in 1967. He went back to Iran and started teaching. I finished up my master's degree and joined him in 1968, February of 1968. And there I started teaching as an instructor with a master's degree in the microbiology department of the medical school at Pahlavi University, then Shiraz University now. Pahlavi, Pahlavi University, then Shiraz University now. We worked there from 1960, my husband's 67, I 68, until 1980. The revolution in Iran had started in late 78 and through 79. And by 1980, it became very clear that things were going from bad to worse. They had taken the hostages on November the 4th, 1979. That was a month after the birth of our youngest son, Kayvon. And then in the spring, they started really making a lot of effort to put the women back in hijab, H-E-J-A-B, which means the scarf and the cover and the veil. And eventually they closed the universities that spring because there was a lot of student unrest. And
Closed all of them?
Yes.
In the whole country?
The whole country. They closed down the higher education universities because they saw them as seats of unrest and unruliness and whatever. And there was a lot of fighting between the leftists and the conservatives, and the conservatives had started to gain a lot more power, the religious right, and they wanted to consolidate it. So they closed the universities because they were afraid that the student unrest might take it away from them. So at that point, we decided that it really was not wise for us to stay because there was no reason for us to say the universities were closing. We could still get our salaries and be paid and all of that sort of thing, but it just wasn't a place where we wanted to be anymore. And we had 3 children by that time, and they were half American, half Iranian, but very Western in their thinking. Right. And we knew that it would be very hard on them growing up in a very restrictive environment. So, and partly because we were able to leave because I was an American citizen and my husband could get permission to come to the States and eventually become a part of get his green card and get citizenship. So, but I need to back up a little bit academically because in 1976, before the revolution, before all of this trouble in Iran had started, Mohammed had come back to the United States. We had come back all together as a family on a sabbatical leave. He was working for a Nobel Prize winner at Harvard called E.J. Corey. I started my doctoral program at the Harvard School of Public Health in 1976 because we just thought it was a good time at that point now for me to go back to school and start to work on my doctorate. So the year of 1976-77, that's exactly what we did. He was working for E.J. Corey, and I was getting my doctorate, or starting on my doctorate degree, which meant a lot of coursework at that first year and my preliminary qualifying exams. I took my first qualifying exam, I think, in the summer of '77, and then left to go back to Iran. And then returned this next summer of '78 to take my second qualifying exam. That was their system.
Right.
They had two. One was within the department, and one was with two other departments in your own department. In any case, those all went very successfully, and I had envisioned doing my research and writing my thesis for my doctorate in Iran on a project in Iran. And I'd gotten all my project proposal done, and everything was okayed for this, and I had mentors both on that side and this side of the ocean. Everything was fine and going very well, and then of course the revolution came. So that looked like it was going to just sort of bomb. Perhaps a poor choice of words. In any case, so when the revolution started in the fall of '78, '79, it progressed, etc., with various uprisings around the country, etc. At that point, getting my doctorate seemed to be a very small matter and perhaps almost trivial. And I had put the whole notion, really, of trying to finish aside, because at that point we had to start all over again when we came to the States in 1980. And that summer, when we went back to my parents' home in Florida, they had meantime retired to Florida. My father was always a very determined man, and he just felt that I needed to finish my doctorate. And all during the revolutionary period, when we were experiencing all kinds of very odd and different things, he was in touch with Harvard School of Public Health to make sure that they still had me on the rolls. And in fact, that they would entertain my coming back and finishing my degree there rather than in absentia as I had originally planned. So that summer, he convinced Mohammed and me that I really needed to go back and finish my degree. So this was the summer of 1980. And they said, my father very gleefully said, well, we'll take care of the children. Because by that time there were 3. And you go to Boston with Mohammed and get done, and Mohammed can get a postdoc and blah, blah, blah. Well, I guess we decided that that was the thing to do. There are always times when you think, was that really the wisest thing? But that's what we did. And so the 3 children remained in Florida with my parents, and Heidi was 12 and Michael was, Heidi was 12 and Michael was 10. The baby was 1. Any case, that year went pretty well, except that it was hard to be apart from the family, very hard. And so at the end of that summer, and I did join a group, I started working. Mohammed got a postdoc and then a job at Boston College. So he was first, I think, doing a postdoc, and then he got actually a teaching position at Boston College. I'm not sure which came first. But anyway, at that summer of 1981, I told my parents that I just couldn't put up with another year without the children. It was just too difficult for me. So my parents said, okay, we'll move to Boston.
Really?
So they moved to Boston, and we rented a house together in Waban, Massachusetts, a suburb of Boston, Newton area, and we all lived together in this house. And I continued my schooling, and most of it, by this time, had gotten into the lab research. And Mohammed continued for that year, and my parents managed the children and our very complicated life. And we went through one of the hardest winters, I think, that I've ever experienced in this very old home in Waban that had no insulation. But in any case, that was, so the spring of 1982, it became clear that I was going to be finishing up my lab work anyway, probably by the end of the summer. So Mohammed started looking for a job and interviewed here and there, and one of the interviews was here in Muncie and at Ball State. And he really liked the idea of coming back to Indiana. So did I. We regarded it as sort of our second home in America, and he felt very comfortable. He'd had some offers from some other places, but he liked Indiana. He felt comfortable. So he took the job in the spring of 1982. And I remember arriving on campus. I think he'd already taken the job, and he brought me in April 10th, 1982, and we had a snowstorm. Of course, we were leaving a snowstorm in Boston, so it wasn't a big shock, but I remember that very clearly, and when people talk about long winters, I remember that date very clearly. So we moved here. I worked all the rest of that spring and summer on my degree, my research for my degree, I should say, and got to a point where I had enough. I had one of the stipulations of my research is that I had to have papers published before I could graduate. So I had enough work done and data collected for 3 papers, so I felt like I could leave. And so we came here in August of 1982 as a family. My parents went back to Florida, and we took the 3 children. Of course, the children had gone back to Florida. I mean, it's all very complicated. I'm sorry for this long discussion. Most people's is not this. Most people do not have revolutions and all this sort of in their training. But anyway, so we arrived here in August of 1982, and I that year wrote up my thesis. The papers were being published, but I had to compile my thesis, and it had to be compiled by essentially putting the 3 papers together and then having an introduction and discussion and that kind of. So it was a nice kind of thesis to write. I didn't have to start from ground zero. I could have the papers in it. And it made a lot of sense because actual papers are the bread and butter of science.
Sure.
So anyway, that year I spent writing my thesis and taking care of our 3-year-old, and the 2 children got into schools here. And that went well. Mohammed had started his first year, and I defended my thesis in about March of 1983 when we moved into our new home, and I graduated in June of 1983. And I applied for a position here, and I was hired in fall of 1983 as a temporary position.
You mean contract faculty or part-time?
Contract, temporary.
Okay.
For
So you weren't
1 year.
you weren't originally hired on tenure?
No, no. And but there was a great deal of controversy in our department about hiring me or not, because there was another fellow who had been here for a little bit longer than I had. When it came time for the next fall, I think, whether they were going to hire me on tenure track or keep the other fellow, and they kept me.
Did you have to go through another search to do that?
I believe so.
Okay.
But it was between people that were already here, so I don't know how formalized it was.
Probably less formal then than it is now.
Right, I'm sure it was, and I remember there was a great deal of controversy, and the fellow that didn't get the job was very angry at me. But
so you spent 1 year as a contract faculty.
Right.
So you would have been in that wonderful category the next year called contract turning regular.
I don't know what they call it.
Did they count that year toward tenure?
I believe they did.
Oh, okay.
I believe they did.
So the following year, as a result of this, just an internal search or an internal external? Or?
I think it was an internal search based on the fact that they had some sort of a slot open, but we were not competing for the same teaching.
Right.
I think they even offered the other fellow that he could stay and still be temporary.
Oh, okay.
But I was put on tenure track.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
All right.
and it was, I remember, I think my starting salary was $17,000.
Okay.
And I was happy.
Yeah.
But in any case, those were the days that was in 1983. Dr. Welker was the chair of our department.
Right.
And I enjoyed teaching. I remember my first few years,
Right.
it was very difficult because I had the 3 children at
right.
home, getting used to a new system, a new place, and having to teach quite a bit. And also, I very early started on my research.
Okay.
So.
This is a funny question to ask you because, of course, I've interviewed Mohammed before you, so I kind of know the answer, but I got to get this in a category. And the atypicality of my interview with Mohammed, atypical in the sense of what the majority of other people have said when I've asked them this question, and that is, I ask each person, well, okay, you came to Ball State, and why did you stay? Well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but in the case of Mohammed, he said, I really wanted to come to Indiana, I really liked it here, I never had any intention of going anyplace else. Did you feel the same way?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So once you took that job and once you're on tenure line, and your husband has a really nice position in the chemistry department, you're here.
Yes.
All right. So you didn't really spend a lot of time, like a lot of our colleagues, saying, oh, I'm going to be here for 5 years and then go to Michigan State or Kansas.
No. We never wanted to really go anywhere else.
Okay.
I suppose if things had been very unhappy
Right.
or not accommodating for us, we would have.
Okay.
But
it wasn't a career plan.
No career plan.
Okay.
No, we came here knowing that this was a good place for us
Sure.
and a good place for our children. And I don't want to make you think that we took this just because it was the only thing there.
Mm-hmm.
It was a really conscious decision that we wanted to be sort of in Middle America. We had
Right.
lived in the Northeast with our family, and we just really didn't want to be in the Northeast. We knew that the community was a good community here for the children. They were in sort of their mid-childhood careers, so to
Right.
speak, because Heidi was starting high school and Michael was going into junior high. And we didn't want to move them around a lot.
Okay.
One of our middle child, Michael, at one point said, are we going to leave here? Because we had moved quite a bit from the time we left Iran. So we made a conscious decision to choose here. We liked the university. We liked our colleagues almost immediately.
Okay.
And no, it was not a stepping stone at all.
When you came here, and you came here at a time of great transition in Ball State's history, because that was when my predecessor, Jim Cook, was provost, that major changes occurred, especially in the lives of faculty members. But when you came here, did you have any sense of your role as a faculty member being what we now call teacher-scholar, that you really were expected to be an outstanding teacher and also have an ongoing record of scholarly productivity?
Yes, I did. I don't know whether... No, we were told from the very beginning that we were expected to do research.
Okay.
We were, and that our, certainly in my case, I remember very clearly that if I wanted to become a tenure track, that I better show evidence of having done some research and be active and that sort of thing. And yes, it was made very clear from the beginning.
Unlike some of your senior colleagues.
Yeah, I think there was definitely the sort of the old school, new school, as I guess there always is, in in a university setting. But quite obviously, some of my older colleagues who have since long time retired were not doing much research.
Right.
But they were also, I remember clearly, being at least, if not told, strongly suggested that they get involved in research.
Okay.
And some people who had not done very much research started to do some. even in those days.
Okay. As you look back on your long distinguished career here, in what ways do you think Ball State changed?
I think Ball State became more dedicated to scholarship.
Okay.
I think they became convinced of their own role in higher education in Indiana. I think in many ways when I first arrived, you got the feeling from some of the people that we were just sort of teaching classes and taking care of sort of the upper, the post-high school education.
Yeah.
But I think as time went on, it became much more of a dedication to scholarship, to good teaching, not simply going through the motions of teaching. I think good teaching became very much, I think we had evidence of quite a bit of support from our administration as far as monies from the research area. If we had good ideas, I think particularly in research or whatever, we got help, we got support. I think there was a lot of change as far as the attitude towards scholarship. Sometimes to the point where I felt, though, that we were being expected to be jack of all trades and masters of none, because I think there were so many expectations of us as far as being able to teach and teach a lot and teach very well and to be wonderful scholars and have all this research going on with students, etc., and to be heavily involved in service to the university, and to be advisors to students in a very kind of hands-on manner. I think sometimes the expectations that were made clear to us were just almost overwhelming in how we could get it all accomplished, and accomplished well. So I will have to say that sometimes I felt frustrated by the fact that I knew I couldn't be a great scholar and a great teacher and a great advisor and a great service to the university.
Say nothing of being a great mother.
Well, yes, and then a mother and wife, so that I mean.
And wife.
And wife.
Yeah, exactly.
And so sometimes it was overwhelming. I really do think that, and I guess if I would. I think in a position, I've thought many times in the past how you could better balance an individual faculty's load in such a way that you get the optimum. And I've often thought that it would be nice to have sort of a job description, and that everyone wouldn't be expected to do it all.
Right.
I remember, actually, when we first arrived, I think our promotion and tenure reports that we had to give, you actually reported what you expected out of yourself, and you broke it down into percentages and things like that.
Yeah.
And then that disappeared.
Right.
And I remember when we go through promotion and tenure and evaluation of not only ourselves but everyone else, we were expected to be high in all the categories.
Yeah, right.
And I always thought that was sort of strange, if not ludicrous, because how could you be above average? How could everybody be above average in all areas?
Like Wobegon.
Like Wobegon. It didn't make a whole lot of sense, and some people's strengths laid, or lay in some areas, and some people's strengths laid in others. And I sometimes think that we don't acknowledge that, and we don't sometimes bring out the best in people by saying, well, you're just an incredibly productive teacher, and maybe we shouldn't expect as much from you as scholarship, or you're an incredibly talented in advising, maybe you shouldn't be expected to do as much in research. And I don't think there's that kind of flexibility in our system. And that would be something that I've often thought, if we could somehow manage to do that. And I don't know whether I'd go so far as to have like the teaching faculty,
Right,
research
right,
faculty
yeah.
strata,
Yeah.
the way they do in some universities.
Right.
But some sort of flexibility as far as that would be concerned.
I think it's hard, though, because, as you certainly know, research is the coin of the realm. And that's what gets you recognized by colleagues and peers. And no matter how great a teacher you are, your colleagues may know it, your students may know it, but people in your professional area of expertise don't know it. They
Yeah.
either kind of assume that you are, they assume that you're not. But it's not something that you could read in a journal or
No.
hear at a scholarly conference.
It's true, but I think as a teaching institution,
Mhm.
somehow we need to balance
Mhm.
the expectations a little
Mhm.
better.
I think
feel.
the problem with the Ball States of the world is exactly as you said, it's the balance. That if you're on the biology faculty at IU, you know what the game is.
Mhm.
And if you're on the chemistry faculty at Michigan, you know what the game is, or in my case, history. The problem that we have is exactly as you pointed out, it's this balance. That we say to everybody, oh, we'll do all of this. And it becomes an incredible time sink for people. But particularly in the case of someone like you, where you get involved in a lot of advising of pre-med students and things like that, plus your own research, plus teaching. I mean, it just is the kind of thing that by the end of the day, you say to yourself, how many hours are there? There simply aren't enough.
And it's not even hours as much as it is concentration.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I found with my own research that I would be hard pressed to have 30 minutes where I could
Yeah,
just sit and
right.
think,
Right. Yeah.
or read an article and just contemplate something. And that's not trivial
Yeah.
for somebody
Oh, no, no.
who
I
is
would
trying
agree.
to do something on a scholarly or intellectual basis.
Yeah.
You can't deny, you can't just break it up into contact hours,
No, I know, that's
research.
right, yeah.
You can't, it doesn't work that way.
When you think of the changes that occurred during your career as a faculty member, I guess I'm making the assumption that you see them as positive.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Another one I wanted to toss at you was that in the latter part of your career, the university made a significant change in the standard for admission of incoming freshmen. Did that impact you and your department much at all?
I don't remember seeing a great deal of change
Okay.
in our students. I think that would be what I would focus on as far as whether it had a. I know, however, that the general tenor of the idea and the concept had a great impact on the morale of the faculty.
Okay. Oh, okay. Good point. Yeah.
Okay. The fact that the
Yeah,
administration was sort of admitting
Mhm.
that we cannot just let everybody in, and it was our job undercover to sort of do this remedial work with them.
Right,
That we that they admitted that in some ways, and I've said this before, that we can't just false advertise, like give me your hungry and your poor
Yeah,
and your
right.
downtrodden, and we'll
Yeah.
make Rhodes Scholars
Right,
out of them. It
right.
just doesn't work that
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
So I think the morale of the faculty was a critical
Okay.
critically improved after this, and they felt like I think that the administration was on our side.
Okay.
And I don't know whether this is, and perhaps I'm talking out of school here, but I remember at one point there was some sort of course that was initiated that many of the administrators took on
Mhm.
their this course
Yeah, we did it for a year.
Yeah. To teach
Yeah.
the lower
Yeah.
performing students.
Right.
And it seemed to be right after that there was this revolution in concept about admission, and I always tied the two together in my own mind, that the administrators finally saw that you cannot teach, you cannot make a college student out of an illiterate, unfocused, non-performing
Yeah.
youngster, and that this, I think that was one of the best things that the university did for the morale of the faculty, and it sort of got around that, yeah, now they know what we deal with in so-called the trenches.
No, you're right. It was the only time that President John Wortham and Vice President Tom Kinghorn ever entered a classroom on a regular basis. I'll take a lot of the credit for this because I said you can't do this unless you're going to do it yourselves. I mean, the academic affairs administrators like myself had always taught, even though they were in administrative positions, they had the requirement, which I set forth, that they had to teach at least one class a year. So this was really a year in the fall semester where I convinced all of my vice presidential
And
colleagues.
it was a wonderful move.
Well, they realized that, you know, they were just absolutely dumbfounded that
Yeah.
these students wouldn't do the work they assigned, that they'd come to class and they'd have materials for discussion, and people would just sit there like a bunch of lumps and they wouldn't do
Yeah.
it. So I mean, that's not the only reason that led people to make
Right.
these changes, but it had a lot to do with it.
Well, and I think everyone around applauded that and felt
Yeah.
that that was a very important kind of sea change
Yeah.
in the attitude of the administration toward the faculty, that we were not just sort of blue-collar workers,
Right.
just not
Right.
really
Right.
wanting to do our job well, that
Yeah.
we were struggling sometimes with how to you know, and up until that point it was sort of retention,
Yeah, right,
retention,
right, right, right.
and but we were somehow trying to retain people that were not
Right.
qualified to be here. So in any case, that was, I think, an important step. And I actually served on the search committee for the new admissions director.
Right.
So we were very happy with him and
This
very
is Larry Waters?
right,
Yeah.
Larry Waters, and very happy with him as a
Oh, yeah.
choice, and also felt that he really got the mandate that
Yeah.
he needed and he wanted to change things. And I remember after he started refusing people who had
Right.
traditionally always been able to get in. He even mentioned that he was getting death threats and things
Mhm.
like that. But I remember, you know, faculty going up to him, including myself, and saying, "Stick with it,
Yeah.
stick with your guns," and this sort of thing. And he said, you know, it really helps to have the faculty behind me
Yeah.
in this sort
I
of
think the death
endeavor.
threats might have come more from the football coach.
Maybe, I don't know, but you know, he was.
Well, he's made a real difference here. I mean,
He has.
he did come in here, you know, from his background at the University of Maryland and at Howard, and say, you people are better than you think you are.
Yes.
And you have to have higher standards, and you have to become more, as we
Well, you know,
often used to say
it's
before, more like Miami is in Ohio.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I felt much of the task that I had, particularly for our better students, as an advisor, as a mentor for students in research or in my classroom, was to convince the students that they were better than they thought they were.
Right.
I think there's something about an Indiana mentality that, you know, you're just sort of homegrown, home thing, local, and there's nothing wrong with that, except that when you don't believe that you're as good, or you're maybe
Yeah,
even
right.
better than some other places.
Yeah.
And I think if that was an attitude on some of the faculty and administration or whatever, it was also true of our students, that they didn't
Yeah.
see themselves as being as good as they were. And I remember on many occasions telling my students, sure, why don't you apply to, you know, University X or
Right,
University Y, or you can do this. I can? You know, am I good enough?
Yeah,
You know,
right.
and I'm saying, yeah, you're good enough.
Uh-huh.
You know, so I think that there was sort of a malaise of disbelief and
Sure.
a lack of confidence. And I'd say now there's a lot more confidence on the university campus, a lot more belief in themselves as not only as
Yeah.
faculty but as a university than
Well,
there was
let me
originally.
turn this a little bit. Think of some people in your career here and elsewhere who might have had some influence on you. There are particular individuals that played an important role in Nancy Behforouz becoming Nancy Behforouz, the teacher scholar at Ball State University.
Oh, there are many of them, and I probably couldn't name all of them, but I remember a professor at IU, Dr. Konetska, is a
Can
phenomenal.
you spell that?
Konetska, Konetza.
Okay.
He at one time, I think, became director of, or maybe graduate student, I'm not
Oh.
sure. He was somebody at IU after. He was a fairly new professor when I was there. and then Dr. Weinstein at Dr. Brenneman, Dr. Muller at IU. All of these people were just, stimulating and inspiring for me as a young student. Dr. Poindexter was a female, which was interesting, and she was also very sharp. Didn't spend a whole lot of time at IU, but our tenure there overlapped.
Yeah.
And then, my professors at the University of Virginia, Dr. Volk and Dr. McCormick, and some people I worked with as colleagues at the Pahlavi University that influenced me. Dr. Rezai was the chair of our department, and funny little man, but he was a good researcher.
Can you spell Rezai?
R-E-Z-A-I.
Okay.
Hamid Rezai, H-A-M-I-D.
Okay.
Then when I went to Harvard School of Public Health, Dr. Jan Czerny, C-E-R-N-Y, he was from Czechoslovakia, fabulous immunologist, a great brain. My own mentor, Dr. Diane Erdley, E-A-R-D-L-E-Y, a woman, and Dr. Max Essex, who became the chair of the department, who's a very big person now in AIDS research and retroviruses. He's still there, very big name at the Harvard School of Public Health, Max Essex. I think when I was being here, I've enjoyed working with my colleagues very much. I think, I suppose Marge Smeltzer had a really, I think she served very well as a stimulating mentor of an administrator. I don't know how she was as an administrator.
About 50-50.
Yeah, but as a stimulating, kind of exciting person to have. I remember her discussions on, I don't know, was it beauty? Or,
Yeah,
right?
Did a symposium about beauty.
Yeah.
Right. She was great on that stuff.
Yeah, she was, and I think she was well, she wasn't a frustrated teacher. She was definitely a kind of a teacher.
Oh, she's a good teacher. Yeah.
And so I enjoyed that interaction very much. I had a downright fight with her at one point because I'd written her a letter about my poor salary and how I never seemed to be getting out of the starting salary that I started with. And I never seemed to progress very much. And she, I don't know, got angry at me for reasons which I didn't call me up and was very angry. And then I wrote her this letter and I said, I don't know where you're coming from. I don't know. And then we became great friends. But anyway, she seemed to fly off the handle sometimes. But in any case, she was a real stimulating force. Right. That sometimes our deans tend to be just sort of mechanics, and she was not a mechanic by any means. I enjoyed working with a lot of my colleagues in the department, Claire Chateau and Carl Warnes and Dr. Don Hendrickson and Carolyn Van and a lot of them. Just great to work with.
Good experience as far as collegial relations.
Yes, yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your special areas of involvement with the university. I know for years you were the pre-med advisor. But in addition to that, were there other areas that were particularly important to you as far as service within the university community?
In addition to being the pre-med advisor?
Well, I mean, pre-med, I say that as a kind of highlight because we go back to honors days when you were doing that.
Right, yeah. I think all of my that I can think of my service to the university, whether it was the advising in the last, 12 or 13
Right.
years that I did, or I served as on the graduate, graduate, what was it called then?
GEC.
GEC,
Yeah,
right.
graduate education.
Right. That was very rewarding. I enjoyed my interaction with that whole area. Who was the dean of that school, the graduate school, when I was?
Oh, Dave Wheeler.
Dave Wheeler.
Sure.
Yeah, I enjoyed interacting.
Yeah.
The multiple committees that I served
Right.
on here and there for, I don't know what it was. There was some with
Good use of word. Multiple.
service committees that I served
Yeah.
on, whether it was with I think there was some time with the international group.
Yeah.
There was some time when we were going from the professional-based advising to the
Yep. Faculty advising.
faculty advising. I served heavily in that,
Yeah.
and we did the audit system, where we going into
Right,
the
yeah. The
DAPR,
Yeah.
which I thought was a great,
Yeah.
great innovation. And in some ways, I think our advising at Ball State is much superior to advising that I've seen in other
Oh, really?
universities.
I'm glad I did that.
Yes. I think, first of all, the DAPR gave
Yeah,
the students more power
Right.
to see what they were doing. I think it put a load on the faculty to do
Yeah.
the advising, and some faculty members I know took it more seriously than others.
Sure.
But on the, I think it made it so much more meaningful.
Yeah.
I think I like the freshman advising system, although I think that there could be a more concerted effort for integration between the freshman advising and
Upper division.
the upper division, because I purposely would, as pre-med, or wasn't just pre-med, I was pre-health profession, because I
Right.
handled like this
Yeah.
huge group of different kinds of students on different tracks, and I would go to them and give them little seminars on what we were doing, and that was very informative. And sometimes I think the freshman advisors have to operate sort of in the dark, as far as
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
departments and programs change, and then the freshman advisors are telling their students to take X, Y, and Z when actually they need A, B, and C, and that sort of thing. But I think that the system as a whole, I thought, was excellent, and worked very well for our students. The pre-health professional advising here, I know is far superior to that students get at IU. And the reason I can say that is my own children
Right. Sure.
were at IU, and I know what they got or didn't get. And I know what I gave to the students as students here, and what
Okay.
their access that they had here. So I sometimes think that we perhaps could do a little bit more in helping our faculty be better advisors.
Oh, as far as training.
Training.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah.
Because I learned through experience,
Yeah.
and just because I really cared. But a lot of people, I think, well, I shouldn't say a lot, but I think some people need to have a little more,
Little guidance.
little more guidance,
tips.
a few tips,
Yeah.
and again, I think that's an area where we could look at people's strengths and weaknesses, and maybe that all people should not be advisors.
I have to agree with that.
So, I thoroughly enjoyed doing the service, and I thought that it was something that was positive, had positive outcomes. My only problem, again, was the balance.
Yeah, time,
trying
sure.
to do it all, and
Well,
trying
let me
to...
go one step beyond that then. How about areas of involvement in the community outside the university?
There was some that I did, although I'll have to say that I didn't do as much as I probably would have liked, simply because of time and
Right.
having a family at home.
Sure.
Because a lot of my time at home was spent with taking care of the 3 children, because they were in their teenage, college, or young childhood years, all the years that I was teaching. So I didn't do as much in the community as perhaps I would like to do, although I did get involved in oh, speaking at Rotary,
Yeah, right.
that sort of thing, and what was the I can't remember it now, the community-based effort that started about 4 or 5 years ago with Molly.
Oh, Flotter.
Flotter.
Yeah, right.
I can't remember.
Which had to
what-
do with health and things of that nature.
Right,
Yeah,
and trying
right.
to promote the
I
the
can't think of
community.
the name of it, but I
Yeah,
know
the
what you're talking about.
community-based.
Kind of like community wellness or something.
Yeah, right, like that.
Okay, let me turn this a little bit and ask a kind of faculty question. During the years that you were a member of the faculty, did you feel that the faculty had an appropriate amount of say in the decision-making process of the institution? Do you think the faculty had an opportunity to give their views? I'm looking here a little bit at the structure of the university senate, because now there's a lot of sentiment to move toward more of a faculty senate. So I mean, there were ways to do this within departments, within colleges, but then we had the university senate, which of course included administrators and students. Now there seems to be a sentiment that, well, the faculty voice needs to be clearer, sharper, and the way to do that is to have a faculty senate. I just wondered what your perspective is on the role of the faculty in terms of having an appropriate voice.
I guess I'll have to admit that I wish I knew more about
Okay.
this. I don't feel that I know as much as I should, which may bespeak the fact that maybe we don't have as much
Okay.
voice,
Okay.
or we didn't have
Right.
as much voice as we
Right.
should. I'm not sure that we felt outside of the department that we had a whole lot of say in
Okay.
almost anything.
Okay, all right. That's
I
fair.
remember when we were going from quarters to semesters.
Right.
And most of the faculty felt very negative
Right.
about that
Right.
switch.
Right. Did you feel negative about that?
I was of two hearts
Okay.
on that. I really feel educationally a 10-week period is a more pedagogically valuable
Okay.
time period.
Right.
But I also understand perhaps the mechanistic economic reasons for going to semester, and I think if anything, the faculty feel perhaps, at least this is the way I always felt, that economics seems to be the decision maker
Oh.
regardless of the pedagogy.
Right. Yeah.
And maybe that's the way it has to be. You know, I don't know. I don't look at balance sheets and money's coming in and money's going out. And, you know, I know that, you know, you have to be realistic. I'm not sure that, you know, although the university is definitely not a profit-making
No.
institution, on the other hand, it still
Yeah.
has to have some sort of reasonable balance sheet.
Right.
And I think that if anything, the faculty sometimes gets, you know, perhaps our opinions don't get asked, or things just come down from above. You know, I felt like sometimes we kept taking our pulse, you
Right.
know,
Yeah.
and that sometimes just meant more work for the faculty.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think that got to be a little bit overwhelming.
But as far as the governance structure, you really feel you're not in a position to say whether or not it would have been better to articulate this through a university senate or a faculty senate?
The only thing I can say about that is that I think the faculty outside their own departments did not feel they had a whole lot of say in anything.
Fair enough.
And even
Pat-
our representatives in the Senate,
Yeah.
I never got the feeling that they really canvassed us for our feelings about anything.
Yeah, I think that was done better in some departments than in others.
Yeah, in our department, I never got the feeling that we were represented at all. You know, I mean, I never got,
Okay.
and I think maybe it was because we were all so
Yeah.
overwhelmed with our own little, you know, kind of affairs and needs and demands and that sort of thing, that we just didn't have the time to even concern ourselves to some degree. But there was a definite disconnect for me personally between what was going on in our department, anything that might have happened in the Senate.
Okay. Last category. How do you view the relationship between what we call the town and the gown in the years that you've been here? The Muncie community and the Ball State community?
I don't think we have a very strong relationship,
Okay.
personally.
Do you think it's changed from the time you came here to the present day? Better, worse?
Um, I don't know. I don't see a
Okay.
whole lot of change.
Okay.
And maybe that's just my own ignorance, and I admit that maybe I'm just ignorant about it. But I see that the university seems to operate on its sphere
Mhm.
of influence,
Okay.
and the town seems to operate on its
Okay.
sphere of influence, and I don't see that there's a whole lot of
Okay.
interaction between the two.
Do you think there should be more?
Probably.
Okay.
I think that the town could benefit from the university, and I think the university could probably benefit from the town. I don't think the people in the university have a whole lot of dedication to outreach to the town.
Okay.
I think there could be a lot more.
Yeah.
I think of projects that sometimes, like in education,
Mhm.
they have to go to Fort Wayne or Indianapolis
Right.
to do their projects. I mean, I don't understand that.
Okay.
Why can't we do those projects here?
Okay.
Now, maybe in other departments, in other areas, there's more, like in urban planning or
Right,
in
right,
architecture and things
right.
like that seem to be more community-based. But, and I know some of our biology people are a lot more involved
Mhm.
than perhaps
Yeah,
I was.
Yeah, the fisheries guy.
Yeah, the fisheries or the Audubon societies
Yeah,
and
right,
things like
right,
that.
yeah.
But I sometimes have wondered, it's almost as if we're operating on different planes, and whether we
Okay.
couldn't.
Well, you have some familiarity because of your own experience of your kids with Bloomington. And some people in these interviews who have had Bloomington experience often contrast what they see as a better relationship between Bloomington as a community and IU as an institution, and say Ball State as an institution and Muncie as a community. Do you have any thoughts on that? Or maybe you haven't been there for that long, I don't know.
I don't know. I think it's a good one. Bloomington, when I was a student there, Bloomington was a real small town with a
Yeah,
small town
right,
mentality,
right, yeah.
and had very little to do with the
Yeah.
large institution. Now, I think Bloomington now is a much more progressive, growing place.
Yeah.
And I sometimes wonder if it's not a critical mass. I feel like of other, and I don't want to be elitist here, but of other sort of educated
Right.
people. Muncie has lost a lot of its upward,
Oh, yeah, right.
or its top tier of other people other than the university
Yeah,
educated.
like Ball Corp.
Ball Corp or all ABB or
Right,
all of
right.
those other places
Yeah.
that we've had a tremendous attrition. And so there's the educated world of the university, and then there's sort of the struggling to survive kind of community of Muncie. And I really feel like maybe Muncie is not taking advantage enough of the university. I don't know what the powers to be running the community are, as far as like bringing in other.
A lot of them are
you know,
Ball State graduates.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that Muncie has suffered over these, unfortunately. I think it's gone backwards over the past
Okay.
20-some years that I've been here, as far as an up-and-coming kind of community.
Well,
We
maybe-
can barely support a couple of nice restaurants.
Well, maybe more direct. I mean, do you really think that there is an anti-intellectual view on the part of the community of Muncie?
No, I don't
Okay.
think it's anti-intellectual. I just think it's just it's just a different sphere.
Okay.
I just don't, it's just a different mindset.
Okay. Those are all the standard questions, but with all of my interviewees, I give them an opportunity at the end to add anything they wish, to reflect and contemplate and perhaps comment on something that I might not have asked you about that you would like to get on the official historical record. Anything occur to you?
Anything that occurs to me.
Yeah.
Oh my. I think as a faculty member here, I sometimes felt that there was a serious disconnect between some of the administrators and what the faculty were actually
Some of
doing.
the administrators felt there was a disconnect between some of the administrators.
Yeah, between what the
Yeah.
faculty were doing, what our daily sort of grind was at the university, and what all that we had to deal with as faculty members, and then the sort of routine kind of mechanics of running the university
Okay.
were.
Yeah.
And
I think it's true.
I sometimes there wasn't enough, and it sometimes bothered me, like with our last dean, not this dean, but our last dean, that he was so distant. I'm not sure. I don't know whether he ever set foot in our
In the science building.
science building. He probably did, but
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
remember that he did.
Yeah.
And
I mean, Johnstone.
yeah. And I don't, he wasn't a bad person or anything, and I don't think he was a negative person, but I just didn't feel like there was very much, I mean, sometimes, when I would talk to students about, well, the dean of this, and he said, who's that?
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
why is the dean such a distant person? I don't understand why a dean is a distant person. Now, the new dean that we have, who is it?
Maggiato.
He seems to be much more concerned with, making himself known,
Yeah, right.
making contact, being there as a sort of if not a leader, at least a ringleader,
Right.
of what's going on.
Back on.
As I was saying, I think I've seen more of Dean Maggiato than in the past year as a retired faculty than I ever saw of Dean Johnstone. And I'm not really being that critical of Dean Johnstone. I think it's a style.
Yeah, it is.
And I would,
agree with you.
and I much prefer the involved style.
Okay.
Because I think it really helps faculty to, I think, realize that they have somebody that's also working for them, understands their problems, understands their situation, and is there to help them out.
Okay.
Is not seen as just sort of this person, way up there.
Right.
And I think your style was
Right.
always one of being involved.
Yeah.
And I think it would behoove all administrators, if they could possibly be, to reach out and be involved within
I agree with
the
that.
faculty, because
Yeah.
I think it's too bad when the faculty get the feeling that they're blue-collar workers tightening bolts.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
just not helpful. And there are always faculty members who are quiet and who do their own thing, and then there's ones that go around beating their chests and beating their drums, and I was never particularly good at beating my chest or
Yeah.
beating the drums about what I was doing, and that was my own problem. It was something that I've always had a problem with. But I don't think that, I think a good administrator on the dean level, and even up and higher, needs to be aware of what's going on. I think that should be one of their first priorities.
Also a department chair, I think.
Yes, in a
Yeah.
department
Yeah.
chair. And I think we need to have fewer managers and more, what would you call,
Well, the style you're talking about, I think, is really hands-on.
it's hands-on and it's stimulating and
Yeah.
it's throwing out ideas,
right.
and
Yeah.
it's like this past fall, and I don't want to be overly
Right.
critical of previous things, but Dean Maggiato got together a group of us who were, because they were thinking of big ideas about like a PhD
Oh, yeah.
and, possibly doing this and whatever, and got together the science people, and we went down and we saw the imaging new, they call it imaging laboratory and whatever. And regardless of whether that really goes anywhere, and actually I hope the PhD doesn't go anywhere, because I don't think that
Right.
we're in a position to offer a PhD for a variety of reasons.
I feel the same way about the history department.
Right. But the fact that he's throwing out ideas, getting us to talk, getting us to discuss, thinking of new ways, thinking of new approaches, getting people from the Med Ed Center over here. It was
Right.
somewhat the way Marge Smeltzer approached things, getting people together across campus, getting them, into
Yeah.
situations where they talk about things, thinking about innovation. I think it's important for a leader to be a leader, not just a manager.
Right.
And that would be one
Yeah.
comment that I would make about sometimes our administration, to stop being managers and just getting everything signed and sealed and dated on the right date and all this sort of stuff, and start thinking about ideas. How could we
Yeah.
better what we're doing? How could we, not necessarily better, but maybe something that we did before was better. Just to think about possibilities.
Think bigger.
Think bigger and inclusive.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate the interview.
You're welcome.